music is interesting. It can change people's minds. But really, I don't know that that's the point. I think the point is like really good art of any kind. I think it just makes you maybe re-examine something in your life or take a look within yourself. When you see something and it really impacts you, I think it's because it's making you reevaluate something on the inside. Good, bad, whatever. It's just like whoa, your eyes get open to something that you did not maybe see in that way before.
So what does it take to become a successful musician or a rock band? I mean, it's everybody's dream as a kid to make it one day and be able to spend the rest of your life doing creative work and earning a living at it. What kind of person typically does that? In this podcast, you're going to learn some very amazing things about some very amazing people. These two cats took a career trajectory that is unlike no other, especially for someone in the music industry. Late bloomers, late starters, collegiate athletes, great football players, Ivy League, and yet now they are successful touring musicians and able to create for a living. It is very remarkable. Their story is fantastic regardless of the occupation that you're in. It's something that you can appreciate somebody being able to accomplish and beating odds and taking a different path that we all could afford to do if we just look closely enough and put our minds to it. So here we're going to engage a little with Gordy Quist and Trevor Nealon of the Band of Heathens. And I can't wait to hear what you think. Let me know on TeeCast. Here we go.
I don't want to start at a place that's terribly boring, and I'm not going to presume that it's boring, but it's a fascinating starting point for me to talk about how you became interested in music and what led you to essentially going to an Ivy League school as athletes, both athletes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then launching a music career because it's such an atypical beginning. So if you don't mind briefly just giving me a general background, did you have a musical family? Did you have just general aspirations as a kid, or did you change your mind at a certain age, or how'd that work out?
I grew up with kind of just my parents were into music. My dad played guitar, kind of always had music around. And I grew up kind of obsessed with the Beatles because I think my parents were really into the Beatles, which is not an uncommon story.
Right.
But music was always a hobby. It was never something that I thought would be a career path. And sports was kind of the thing that I was that was my primary focus, I think, outside of school. And so, I went down that path. I've been in a band since I was 13 years old. So I've always been playing music. And, but it was just kind of my emotional outlet. And then went to school and kind of things flip-flopped at some point where music became the focus. But that was much later and kind of unexpected in my life, I think.
But it was sort of a typical upbringing where you're in athletics and that took up most of your time. So that was kind of the focus. Did you have any aspirations in terms of any vocation at an early age or shooting for sports?
I don't know. My dad was a pilot. And so when I was really young, I think I wanted to do that. And, music wasn't really, I think I didn't really even envision that it was possible to do that was an option, it was just kind of always fun, Yeah.
What about you, Trevor?
Pretty similar. I would say that music was just an outlet, growing up with music in the house. My parents weren't musicians. I think my dad might have sang in a choir, like he was in the Navy. He might have been like in the naval choir or something like that.
Okay.
Loves music, but neither of my parents play. I took lessons like a lot of kids used to take piano lessons, around second grade or whatever, and did that for a few years, and then the ability to, or the discipline it took to practice. I think you get to a certain level of proficiency with music, and they start pushing you towards classical stuff, Beethoven, Bach, Brahms, whatever. And around that point, it was clear like I didn't have that discipline. I was showing up to lessons every week, kind of unprepared.
Yeah.
But I think I had a teacher who recognized I was playing by ear, and she was really encouraging. She was an old lady, but she just said, keep doing what you're doing. And so I stopped taking lessons around then. And like Gordy, sports was a big thing. Probably a little bit later than I got more focused on, playing football and basketball and stuff like that. Maybe junior high school. I wasn't doing that real young. I was just kind of doing everything like a lot of kids did back then. I didn't have a lane, I just kind of tagged along.
Yeah.
And, playing college athletics, especially in Ivy League school, it's pretty demanding as far as the schedule is concerned, time and all that. And music, again, was just kind of there as an outlet, and it was kind of had been an outlet. I didn't play in bands in high school or anything. I didn't play in bands until I met Gordy. And that was like, I think the end of our freshman year, we were both playing with, or he kind of pulled me into a group that he started playing with, which a bunch of guys who were seniors on the baseball team, pulled us into their their frat band or whatever. And they didn't have a keyboardist, so I got to sneak in, and,
Nice.
then we were playing November Rain, Guns N' Roses, and it's like, oh wow, this is fun. But yeah, it was
Funk Barnacle and Seabiscuit Bunch.
Was that the name of?
It was one of many names.
I thought it was Mookie
Blaylock or Mookie Wilson.
Mookie Wilson. Yeah. Mookie Blaylock's Pearl Jam.
That was Pearl Jam. Yeah.
But yeah, just definitely an outlet outside of all that, and then just how it all unfolded. You used the word launch. There's never been a launch, man. This is like we just kind of started doing it.
Into,
and then it, like 9/11 happened our senior year. The job market, there's a kind of the Ivy League sports arena is just like a feeder to Wall Street. All these guys go fit well in the 2-year analyst position where they just work you, nonstop, and you just crunch. And
yep.
And a lot of guys were going to do that. And that was kind of what probably was expected of. I mean, there was an expectation there. That was certainly something you had to entertain, maybe do some interviews to see if it was for you. But then when 9/11 happened, that kind of, those jobs weren't really available. Gordy had one because he had interned and he was able to defer it. But it just provided us like an excuse to just keep our band going, our college band going. We spent a summer on Cape Cod playing, residencies up and down the Cape and having a lot of fun. And all of a sudden it's like summer's over and, there's no more gigs out there. And we're like, what are you going to do? And I think just that experience though was enough that might've been the launch, maybe just in a small way. It was like, hey, this is a lot of fun. And, you're 23 years old. It's like, working a corporate job, this kind of sucks. I want to keep playing. There's a lot there, and I don't know. So just kind of fell into it, the whole thing. So,
and then you guys would obviously have been more than capable because you also kind of just brush over the fact that you went to Dartmouth, by the way, and everything else like that's not a big deal. So that's part of what makes it fascinating. It's not like everybody else who had a mild interest in music and then went to Joe Cool College and then decided to stay in a garage band. So obviously you had some discipline with grades and things like that. Or was football the way that you got to Dartmouth? What made you pick a school like that? Are you guys both from here? Texas-ish?
I'm from outside of Houston.
Yeah, I'm from Tacoma, Washington, so long way.
Okay.
I think I had planned on going to University of Texas, moving to Austin, and kind of being just a normal student, non-athlete, and probably diving into music a little more. That was kind of what I thought I would be doing for school. And then like junior year of high school, I started getting recruited to play football. And so that's what it was kind of like, oh. And
Change
then,
your mind.
yeah. And then there were some of these really great academic opportunities to kind of get a really great education and play football. And so started going on those recruiting trips. And actually that's where Trevor and I met, was on our recruiting trip when we were seniors in high school.
February 98.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, I don't know. It just was like, it seemed like a great opportunity. And my parents were psyched about, the academic opportunity. And it was also like, kind of like, well, football is not like a sport you get to play
forever.
It's like, once it's done, it's done.
Right.
You don't go suit up and play on the weekends when you're an adult. So it was kind of like, well, do I want to keep playing? And yeah, sure. Try another 4 years and then be done with it. So,
so it's kind of, that's where the serendipitous part came, was that you guys met that way. And then by the time you got to the end of school, in combination with the 9/11 and all that kind of stuff, you started playing gigs and decided this might be something you wanted to run with. And you were by that time also interested in seeing what you could make of it, I assume.
Well, yeah. I'd say the fact that football is a fall sport, our senior year, once you get through the season, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have two more. I mean, we're a quarter system at Dartmouth, so we had 2 more quarters of what felt like freedom, even though we're still having to graduate. A huge amount of time just opened up, and we already had this band for several years at that point. That was just a thing for kicks. We'd play fraternity parties or some local gigs, but then all of a sudden it was like, well, let's make a record. And we actually made a record that, I remember we were driving to Boston our senior spring to actually record a record. And it was our first experience. Well, I shouldn't say it was our first experience, because we recorded with Chris Hayward and a couple years earlier than that. But we made a record, and it was like, so we had that. And so I looking back, I know we were taking it that serious. Like, we had songs, and we were all writing original music and wanting to, record it. So there was, I guess, a little impetus to do something other than just play the parties.
That's the rare approach too, is the original music thing. Because based on what you're telling me, playing frat parties and all that kind of stuff is something that typically stays a hobby because you play cover music or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it felt like a serious hobby, kind of like how football was. What we weren't getting paid, it wasn't our job, but we kind of were, like it was our job while we were in college. It was a huge time commitment. And once that was gone, it was like, all right, music, we can really focus on this as the very serious hobby. But I had a job offer that I had deferred for a year to play in this band. And even at that point, I wasn't sure. I was starting getting into songwriting, and that was a whole nother like realm of just a different thing than like entertaining a party with dance music. It was like, this was like more down the path of like a creative and emotional outlet for myself, selfishly. That I started getting into around the time I had to go start working this job. So the band kind of fell apart and, took a break, and we all went and worked straight jobs for a year. And actually working a straight job is probably what made me like realize I do not want to do this, and I want to play music.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like by not doing it for the first time, or, kind of realizing maybe like, oh, like football ending and being done, this too could kind of be done if you don't nurture it and try to do
You're
something.
Looking at something like way down the horizon with that soup job too.
And you weren't just doing a straight job. 80-hour weeks, right? Working, sleeping under your desk,
I was working for Lehman Brothers as a financial analyst, which brutal. Is kind of funny now. It was brutal. It was brutal. And I learned how to use Excel, and I knew pretty quickly I wanted out. And so I was just waiting for the year-end bonus. I was supposed to be a 2-year program, but you get a bonus at the end of year one. And the day that the bonuses hit, I was hitting refresh on my bank account, and the money hit, and I got up and I quit.
Yeah.
and I gave my 2 weeks notice. And then the plan was I'm going to Austin and going back to music. And I, called the guys and we got the band back together.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I know there was a little bit of other circumstances that hit that actually put Heathens together specifically, right? But how long did you guys play without Trevor for some period too, right? And then how long was it before you jumped in the game?
Well, so Gordy and I both, so August of 2004 is when we moved to Austin. Gordy had already kind of been coming and going, looking for a place, and scouted out an apartment for us. And one of the guys from our college band, another dude we played football with, and then another pal of mine, and we all met in Austin. And, Gordy had a solo thing going, had already been gigging, around Houston, I think even Austin, Dallas. But the rest of us were just new to Texas. It was like, hello, and we're dropping into a pretty hefty music scene, not really having any experience on what it really means to go hustle some gigs and get work. And it was tough. I for one really enjoyed Austin. It was a great experience, but that first couple months really was wearing the edges started to fray pretty quick for some of the other guys. And so it didn't really work out. Our college band came here, did some gigs, but it was like, man, this is too tough. I mean, playing, throw and go 45-minute set, playing with 4 other bands at a club on a Wednesday. It's hot. You're loading your own gear and you're not making any money. There's nobody there. Yeah. Like, it's a far cry from like, you're the life of the party or whatever, sure, like on Cape Cod.
Right.
But, so there was a little breaking point. I actually left and I went to Park City with that other guy that was on our team. His name's Damien. And he had been living in Park City for a year already at that point. Gordy's freshman year roommate grew up in Park City, was on the U.S. ski team, mutual friend of all of ours, had plugged him in. He was gigging in Park City where there were lots of gigs. They paid well. He was like, I want to go back to doing that. So I didn't follow him right away, but it was a few months later that I went up there. And this is like a year into being this is probably August of 2005. And right around the time I left is when the Heathens, they never really officially started. It just kind of fell together. And and then, it was just like, once they started touring, I was in Utah, and their first tours were really outside of Texas, were like Colorado. And I think I helped them get a gig at Sundance Film Festival. I was living in Park City. I was gigging a lot when I was living in Park City. Had met up with a band and was playing. And I was like, hey, you guys come through. I'll get you some gigs. No problem. And they were great gigs. And I ended up, what I thought was going to be like a sit-in, the first show was like, Gordy's like, come on, like first song, and I'm playing the whole night. And then it was like kind of built from there. And awesome. And I'd say for three or 4 years, I eventually made it back to Austin pretty quickly after that. But for about 3 years there, I was just kind of, if the schedules lined up and whatever, if there was enough money in the budget, they'd be like, come on, you can go. They didn't have a keyboard so I could play. I just kind of fell in.
That segues into kind of my next inquiry, which is coming up. I was doing music through the early 90s up through the mid 90s, and you were watching the transition from cassettes to CDs and things like that, and licking stamps and sending mailing lists out to your fan base and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Compared to now, I mean, you guys have lived through a process of that too. And the fact that you kind of morphed into this band without necessarily a roadmap to success, right? Because nobody other than hustling and playing gigs. Can you talk a little bit about how you built yourself up to such a successful place? And, from essentially kind of falling into a group that made sense?
It's hard to.
It's interesting because I've never thought about that. Like when we started, even our college band, like we were making our own press kits. Like we had a press photo, we had a CD. We were sending mailers out, and then like MySpace was the thing. Mm-hmm. You had a MySpace page, and you'd send that, and like email was just starting to be like, a thing that everybody was using. This is so. I hadn't really thought about how much the music industry has changed. I mean, Napster was our college years.
Yeah.
I don't think I used it, but I remember seeing people like, whoa, what's that?
It was a huge
So-
controversial thing for musicians too.
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting to think how we've done it.
Well, it's the timing of when the Band of Heathens started kind of coincided with the collapse of, I mean, like free music was kind of becoming the thing where you could download music, not necessarily free all the time, but we released the first record independently, and I think we were always pretty organized, and we had help. Like we had a club owner here in Austin who ran the club that we first started playing at. He was really great to us and just was like, I want to help. I'll be your manager.
Wow.
And so he helped us out kind of, especially in the local scene and around Texas. And, you know, we had all been booking ourselves solo. So we kind of knew how to put a tour together. And well, I know a guy in this city and I know a guy in this city, and everybody in the band would kind of pitch in to like book a tour. And so we've always been this like DIY band. And we did the first record, we borrowed some money and we hired a publicist and did radio. We like kind of did all the things a label would do. We borrowed money and told everybody like, there are no guarantees you're ever going to see this money again. But, you know, if you want to support a band to like try to, you know, give us a shot, like this is what we're going to do with it. And we put a business plan together. And it's crazy. Our first studio record, Ray Wiley Hubbard produced it. We did 2 live records first, but we kind of put a business plan for this studio record together and went into debt and then ended up paying everybody back within like, I think 2.5 years, and then made another record. Yeah. And what's funny is the stock market crashed. The record came out in 2008.
Oh, yeah.
And I did, at one point, this is the Wall Street nerd in me. I did an analysis of like, if you had put your money in the S&P 500 on the day that people wrote us checks to help support the band, and then the payback 2.5 years later, like which money did better? And we actually beat the S&P 500.
Of course. Yeah.
So anyway, I feel like we've embraced the DIY kind of, I guess, mentality. And I've always been like, well, no one's going to do it for us.
Yeah. So,
and we've been fortunate to have help, but we've always been the driver. We're very involved with our management. And I think, you know, our second album, we were actually offered a record deal and we turned it down, and we've been independent ever since. And
what were the circumstances around turning it down?
Well, it was like a 7-album deal.
Oh.
And we all kind of were like, 7 albums seems crazy, and it was non-negotiable. And we had no leverage. You know, it's not like we made a bunch of money, but we made some money. We didn't lose money on the first record, and
Right.
There was a following, and the band was growing, and there was buzz, and so we turned it down. And for many years, I was like, I questioned whether that was a mistake. I was like, maybe we should have signed the deal, gotten all the hope for the promotion and the publicity and the name brand of the band being pushed. Maybe we would have been a much bigger band had we done that. But now in hindsight, we've kind of just been slow and steady. Every year's been better than the year before.
Yeah. And
our touring numbers have gone up every year. And I'm glad we own everything. It's kind of how we're able to sustain, you know, a whole back catalog of music kind of sustains all the new records.
That's why I was interested to know, because you actually functioned as a successful band through some periods of time where 360 deals weren't necessarily happening yet. Getting signed was still kind of a priority. I mean, if you were asked again now for 7-album deal, you would hang the phone up, you know, but back then it was still like kind of made you itch a little bit because it was still part of the process and people were still downloading music and paying 99 cents or whatever. I mean, now it's just a completely different landscape. So coming through that, you're grateful for the fact that you obviously still own your stuff. And it's even more, does it seem more of a niche following that you have now? Or is it just because there's so many more things that people have access to that you're able to continue? Because you're able to continue successfully now doing less of the road work, right, than you used to do, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, even things like cutting live records, and I mean, that's kind of the end of that era too. Nobody does that anymore either.
Yeah.
So you guys have kind of lived through an interesting transition. Is you doing anything different now versus how that, I mean, you talked about the hustle and just picking clubs and everything else. Is that the same way that you try to grow, or are you just trying to sustain the audience you have and grow with them, or what's your process?
Well, I would say Patreon is what we're doing.
Yeah,
now.
That's the new thing.
That's the new thing. And that was something for years, the touring. I mean, we all have families and as we've been, somewhere around year 10, everybody's kids are getting a little older and it's like, well, how do we pull back on the touring and still keep this thing going? And
Sure.
it was constant, tinkering and balance to that. And one of the things that Gordy had talked about long before COVID was we need like a tiered access, kind of gated, like online thing where people can watch us, it's like mic up everything in the studio and video everything and like let people watch us work and, make people pay for it, but then offer them a lot of content. And it was like, the idea had been floating out there, but we just, we're talking about building a widget on our website or something like that. And it just never got pushed over the edge to do it. And then, but it was something we were all thinking about, and as a way of kind of getting that balance just right with the home life as well as the stuff on the road, because it's got to work together or it's just going to fall apart. I think
staying on point of mind that way with the fan base that way without actually being in the city.
Yeah, and then I'd say then the silver lining, one of the many silver linings I think we've been able to pull out of the last couple of years was that we started doing this online show every week, just like everybody. April of 2020,
right.
Everybody started live streaming. Well, we got to do something, and we have fans. I mean, there's people who want to watch. So we didn't have a plan for a show. It was just like literally throwing shit against the wall. Like, we're going live Tuesday night, and it was like right up into the minutes before our first going live, and we were still creating graphic. I mean, it was all just like flying by the seat of our pants.
Another hustle.
And we all lived in different cities.
We all lived in different cities. Gordy and I were the only two in Austin. So it was like,
it was crazy. It was like a weird
Zoom
variety show.
But it ended up, it quickly settled into something pretty cool, and people really liked it. And part of it was, it's kind of like the phenomenon with reality TV. People just like to see, they think it's great when one of our daughters, runs on the screen.
See the innards. This is the real life.
It's real life. And everybody was so, at home that it was just, it was kind of refreshing to just, I think it felt like a gathering. And what we quickly noticed too is that the people who were watching were talking amongst themselves. People who had never met were chatting. Hi, Jen. Hi, Richard. Hi, Tom. They're chatting. And so we did it for a year, and knowing about Patreon through friends of ours who are artists who were doing it, we were able to easily roll that into Patreon. And by the time we announced it, just the people who are our regulars every week, we didn't even announce it publicly. Like literally everybody signed, like the night we announced it, it was like 150 people signed up. All of our top tiered access things filled right up. And it was like, man, this is something here, And so we're sort of talking about like how this is going to work going forward. That's something that we're all, as we come out of, the other side of COVID and all that, it's like, we're all really excited about this. Like, hey, this is something we can do. It's fun. It keeps us working because we have to generate content every month, most of which is valuable to us because we put it out on records. Right. We're just letting a certain hardcore fan base see us make it. But then, it's really the idea is like, oh man, this is going to be great if we can just keep nurturing this. And it's a cottage industry. We just have a little tiny little slice of the music,
which is all you need.
It's all we need, So
how difficult was it to pick up these new things? I mean, even doing a podcast, there's just so many more things to the simplest processes. Was this something you had to do, or you brought in some help?
We were fortunate. We had some people help us out in the beginning, like some people who started as kind of fans of the band who've become dear friends. Like they're like, well, can we buy you a nice camera so it looks good? Don't do one don't make it look terrible. We've seen so many bad, live streams. Get a good camera. And so they helped us with that. And,
awesome.
And my friend's son, he works at this, place where they know which microphone to get, or which they kind of, we had people, we're fortunate that we have this community that supports us, not just by showing up and coming to shows, but when they, hear that, oh, you guys are going to start a live streaming thing. Like, I know somebody who is an expert in this. You need to talk to them. And so we kind of got connected with people that really helped us learn how to do it. We have, now we do a lot of live streaming from here in the studio, and these two brothers, Evan and Dustin Bozarth, they have a amazing kind of series, or it's called Purple Bee TV. And they come and help us out with a lot of the multicam live streaming stuff here.
Great.
But I think it's this whole idea was like, well, we can't go play music. This is what we've always done. Get in a van, go on the road and play music for people. And you bring all these people together. The thing that's interesting is people from all walks of life. We have the people who like our music. I feel really fortunate. It's a wide swath of people, culturally, age, demographics. We were, forget what city we were in. We were in a show the other night, and there was like
Akron.
Akron, Ohio. There were 4 generations of like people in the front row. And I feel so fortunate that our music is this kind of glue that can pull these people together.
Absolutely.
And this live stream idea during the pandemic, when we're all isolated and kind of scared of what's going on and not really sure when it's going to get back to normal, we just kind of used our music as the thing to bring people together. And we were doing ridiculous things. We were reading Shakespeare. Like, we couldn't play music because the Zoom, there's like the time delay, right? So we couldn't actually like harmonize with each other or play together from different cities. So it was literally like, well, what can we do? Well, yeah, we played some songs solo. We would trade verses, and I'd sing the first verse, and then the second verse would go to LA, and then the chorus would go to Asheville. And we were innovative and kind of just goofy and fun. But what we realized was like all these people, music is bringing them together, and togetherness is that community is the thing that makes everybody feel good, us included.
Yeah.
And so that's, we've since then brought that community over to this Patreon thing, and we're trying to still do the same thing. It's like our music is our passion, and it's the most important thing we do. But is it really the most important thing we do? Like, the most important thing we do might just be the fact that the music is bringing people together. And that is really the thing.
Amen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the reason to have you here. So you couldn't have said it more better. I should stop here, but I have more questions, but that would have been a good ender. Like,
mic drop.
Mic drop.
Drop the mic, son.
Yeah.
You figured it out. So this leads to, that again was sort of an interesting way into new discovery about community and everything and other things. And then the decision to do Message from the People record, which I know has drawn a lot of attention, certainly drew attention to me because it was done creatively. It was a fantastic endeavor, and beyond that was its purpose behind it. So I'm interested to hear what made you decide to take that on. Was it very specifically for a particular community? And I understand you're donating profits and things too. And tell me a little bit about how you chose that. What is the kind of the purpose, the beginning of that whole endeavor there?
Backing way up, we're all vinyl collectors, and I have every Ray Charles record from like 68 to 75, 77. There's this like sweet spot where it wasn't like his hit era, but it was when he was making his own records. And all these records, I don't think really any of them are on the streaming services still. So I would rip them and to MP3 so I can have them on the road with me. And so when we're traveling, listen to them. And Gordy and I are in a car, just the two of us. Once we were in a rental car, we were on the East Coast somewhere. I think we were driving to or from an airport, coming home or leaving or something. And just a heavy day. I forget what was going on, but something, some social upheaval that we've all been witnessing, some political thing. And I just put on the record. I don't even know why I put it on, but we were just not talking anyway, because it was just like our minds were both, I think we were having a conversation about something and it just trailed off because it was just like, man, this is heavy.
Yeah.
You know?
I think we were talking about families being kind of pulled apart.
That's what it was. Yeah.
By this kind of just the political division and just how sad that felt.
Yeah.
You know,
conversations amongst loved ones were, getting really tough and all that. So
Absolutely.
I just put on this record, and it was one of those things where, I could still remember parts of the drive where it was like Ray was just talking right to us, and his message at that time, he put the album out in April of 72, and it was really his first concept record. And it didn't like necessarily blow up or anything, but his version of America the Beautiful, which is still the version,
Right.
is on the record. It's the last track of the record. And the first track of the record is lift your
voice,
Yeah.
and sing.
And it's like these bookends of the record. But he had this incredible idea, and he took some songs on the record of protest, some songs are celebrating, what unites us all in America, and it's just like this tapestry, and we listened to the whole thing, didn't say a word the whole time, but you just feel it, like we're both like really being moved by the music. And right when the album ended, Gordy's like, man, like people need to hear this. Like, what if we recorded this album? It was like, I'm like, really? Like it's kind of there's lush strings and background vocals and, orchestral stuff on the record. And it wasn't until maybe a good 6-9 months later that we actually like, man, let's do this. And it actually ties into this place in a way. We had a guy who was like a kind of a guru for us, our producer of a couple records, this guy George Reef, who's a legendary Austin musician. He had been sick for a while with cancer. It was really sudden thing came on, and he had passed. Actually, we were on the road, and this place, it was his home, and he had a studio set up. This is now like a studio, but at the time it was like we were sitting in his kitchen. His kitchen was right there, and there was the grand piano next to it. It was just like he lived here and worked here,
Right.
And the studio, when after he passed, he didn't have any children or he wasn't married, so all the estate went to his brother, who was a non-musician, and some of this gear went to friends, like close friends, like Ray Wiley Hubbard, or musicians around town had.
Right.
But then there was a lot of it left, and Michael Reef, his brother, approached Gordy because he knew we were friends.
Well, yeah, I ended up on the email, like, hey, we're selling George's gear. Let me know what you'd like. And I was bummed that no one was going to keep the studio together
right,
in one piece.
Yeah.
And for a guy who's a non-musician, like this cable could be worth $5 or $500. I mean, it's proprietary stuff. You don't even know what it is. And it's like having to go through that if you're not a musician, and like countless stuff. So the idea was, let's keep it together. And Gordy and a partner, a friend of ours who's involved in the studio, decided to buy the whole studio, not the house at the time. And the whole place had been dark for like 6 months. Because, he was just left with all the stuff, and we, turn on the lights for like 2 weeks. Gordy had some stuff booked where we did records for other people. And then we had like 3 days or 4 days at the end of the session that we were going to just do Heathen stuff. Everybody was in town. We were working with other people, and it became like, hey, well, let's try to do that Ray record in those 4 days. I was like, really? We're going to try to do the whole thing in 4 days. And we did it. And it was just one of those things, like, George was like a real force in all of our lives, and he's become more of that. Like, I think as we continue to do this, like we like feel his presence in different ways, and it was like there was a magic, thing happening. Like it just was this really beautiful flow those 4 days, and we got it done. And so that's part of how the record, it's kind of part of the story of the record, is kind of a in memoriam to our buddy, and then also, the kind of the social aspect of it. So,
fascinating.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to donate?
Oh, we just felt like that was the spirit of the record, and we didn't really want to make it like a for-profit deal. It was kind of just more of like we felt like the record was a gift to us. I wish the record had been more profitable and more of a gift, but but we donated to the Boys and Girls Club of Austin.
Great.
But it was just interesting how that record was received at the time. It just, again, it's like, it was such a, and still is kind of a divided time in our country. And we really like made a point going out playing those songs for everyone, because you can hear one song and you feel like that, oh, the band is like preaching to me about something.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it's like, we really made a point to, and I feel like we still carry this with us now. It's like when we go out on the road, it's not to, music is interesting. It can change people's minds, but really, I don't know that that's the point. I think the point is like really good art of any kind. I think it just makes you maybe re-examine something in your life, or take a look within yourself. When you see something and it really impacts you, I think it's because it's making you reevaluate something on the inside, good, bad, whatever. It's just like your eyes get open to something that you did not maybe see in that way before. And I think that was kind of the point of the record. It wasn't to say like, you guys need to all think how we think, because like we're a band, we're 5 people. We all think differently on things too. But what we've realized is like, love is the most important thing, kindness. And music has the power to like bring people together. And so that record really, it was a delicate thing going out and playing those songs. And we tried to really make a strong point to just celebrate the fact that we're all getting here together to have a good time, to leave everything else in the outside world out, and to really just have a good time with each other. And that's kind of been another one of the gifts of that record, and going through the process of having to tour behind it. It was really great. A lot of those shows, we played the record start to finish. Like we opened the show with the first song and we played the whole thing.
Really? Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
And so it was kind of a statement touring behind that record, more so than any other record we've done. But I think it kind of showed us how to present our show in a way that is really a celebration of that togetherness. And we still, I think, try to have that mindset when we go out and play live.
For sure.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So what, going forward, obviously you're not stopping. You're talking about doing other records. You guys are working with other artists, doing collaborations. You're also doing your own stuff. What are in the works now for future projects, or anything you want to talk about that you're doing going forward?
Well, we're fortunate. This whole Patreon thing, this subscription service that started as the Good Time Supper Club live stream, has moved to this behind the scenes glimpse for the hardcore fans. We really tried to like think up if I got a behind the scenes access to my favorite band, what would I want to see? What could I offer? Yeah. And so we came up with all these tiers. And so for the last a little over a year, we've been doing this, and it's been incredible. And it's forced us to write more songs, to get in the studio often, to record live streams, to be basically like having to do our job publicly. So you can't be lazy. You have to, like, there has to be output.
But you get to be home.
Yeah,
and
we're home.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
it's kind of the beauty of it. Really, is like, I mean, there's so many win-win things about it, but like that in itself is just like, we want to over deliver every month. It's kind of like a thing that we say, because like you just like, you want to make sure everybody who signs up stays, right? And
it's valuable.
The easiest way to do that is over deliver. But the beauty of it is like, we're coming out of the other side of the global pandemic, and we have 2 records. We've already put out one in February. We have 2 more records that are done. They're ready to come out, and we have this whole new approach to how we put them out, like, so we can kind of maximize the impact on the streaming front. And that's going to be the way we work going forward, which is awesome. Well, that's the fun part, is making records and taking them out and doing shows. But this is now kind of streamlined the process for us, where it's like, okay, we kind of have to write songs every month or record songs every month, but it's like, wait, that's a lot of fun. We like doing that. Remember, It's like, this is easy.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's kind of like we turned down the record deal early on in the band's career, and then
We probably couldn't do it if we had a record deal, right? They would probably be. Yeah.
No, I don't know. Who knows who would have bought and sold and owned us, by now. Yeah. But actually 7 records, we would probably still be in that deal.
This would be it, yeah.
But now we kind of have our own, now we're like kind of on a record label. Like we have this community of, a couple hundred people that pay us every month to write new songs, and we have to deliver. The goal is to like Trevor said, to over deliver in terms of they feel like they're getting more out of it than they're putting in. That's my hope. Yeah. And in kind of a cool way, like we have this community that they love our music, and I think even more than that, they love communing with each other with like when we do the live streams and everybody's on together at the same time. That's when it's like really fun.
Who did we meet up with on tour that actually just like the light bulb went off as like, they're like our patrons, our Patreon subscribers are like our label. And it's like, it was like, we could even use that as like, welcome to the BOH Patreon, where you are, they don't have artistic, they can't necessarily tell us, they can offer their input. They have
they're like the world's greatest label,
but they're like the best label because they're funding our records.
And the feedback is literally the end game feedback. It's not somebody like trying to prospect where things should go. I think you should make this sound or whatever, because I think the audience would appreciate this. You're hearing from the audience what they would like to hear, and then you can decide if you want to roll or not. I mean, you can't beat that kind of thing.
We had this like, and I think how it came up is like we have for the album that we'll be putting out next spring, it's like, okay, one of the songs has to go. If we're going to put it on vinyl, like it's not all going to fit. We don't want to do a 2 LP thing. So it's like, which one do we omit? All 5 of us would probably have a different answer. So it's like, wait, let's take it to the patrons. Let's just ask them, and we'll get like, just pick your top 2 and your bottom 2 or something like. Well, we haven't figured out how we're going to present it.
But that's going to be a good.
But it'd be like, it's a good way. And these are our hardest, like the biggest fans of the band. So we'll probably get a pretty,
and they're very honest. They're honest
with
their feedback with us.
Probably give it. It's valuable. That's like valuable intel right there. It's like, okay, this is the one that didn't.
And you're
make
still
it.
doing old school albums.
Yeah,
that's
we still love albums.
Have you ever considered doing the single thing, which is, if you had a brand new band that you were mentoring, you probably recommend that, right? Like,
I don't know. It's hard to say. You're right. Like from a business perspective, it's probably wiser, but it's also kind of efficient to record more than one song, because like once you set up, it takes a day to like set up and get sounds, or a half day. Once you're set up, it's like, well, we might as well do a few. But I don't know. We still love albums.
And we are kind of doing the single thing in a sense, like kind of back to like the beauty of this Patreon thing. We have all this content ready to go that's going to go out, and we're not going to just drop it like we used to. We'd do like 3 singles and the album drops. Like we'll probably put out a song. We have an EP coming out that's already starting to come out, but we're putting out a song every 4 to 6 weeks. Yeah. It's kind of a way of like priming the pump of the streaming thing. Right. And you watch the number. We've seen enough of it now to know that, okay, the numbers our unique monthly listeners start to climb. Yeah. And if we're just trying to find that sweet spot of how often do we put out a single to keep that number trending up. And between this EP and what will be the record release, it's like, okay, we have, 18 songs that are going to be released between now and next spring. And we can spread those out between now and next spring. Because once the album's out, it's like you're kind of done. Like you go play the shows,
you go tour,
but we'll be able to. So it still is kind of like a single thing. All those songs get
dribble out a little bit,
get put in their light, as a single.
They get put in the algorithm,
but then they end up as an album in the algorithm, and we'll have the hard copies for the shows.
And we still do the radio thing, and we have publicists when we release. The thing that's nice about albums is you can kind of get the machine. The old school record machine, we hire the independent people to do all those pieces, and it's easier for them to do their job when it's an album.
Really?
But yeah, I think it's harder to get press behind a single unless it's like you're going hardcore at radio and spending a bunch of money. But
it's more frequent also, so it makes it difficult for them to pound their connections throughout
over
the year.
And over again, right? But what's cool though is with all the algorithms of the streaming services, you get this like the release radars and the new music playlists that the services feed to all the users.
Yep.
That is kind of like its own like radio service. You're like the streaming service is putting your music into the inbox of hundreds of thousands or millions, or depending on where you're at, of listeners. And if they like the song, they come back and they listen more and they listen more. And so it's kind of like, that's the thing that when we make an album, we're still focusing on like, okay, like what's the sweet spot of timing? So space these singles out. How many singles of the 10 songs on the record, do 5 of them get kind of, do you start 6 months before the record comes out and start dropping singles? And we're always trying to like kind of game that algorithm and maximize the return so
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Kind of like singles, but you're
cheating is what you're doing.
Trying to do best of both worlds.
We love albums.
Yeah.
So.
No, we do. I do too. But I'm old, so that's what I appreciate about the concept of the album. There was you can't do a concept record like the Ray Charles.
It's harder to, yeah.
Yeah. Because you can do it with singles, but you're prolonging the point. And like I said, even in your live shows, you try to make sure, hey, if you're sticking around, hear this other piece too. So it's a lot harder to do, but albums were genius like that. But that's old school thing.
You do those for your hardcore fans, which we're trying to gather with Patreon. You do those concept records, full albums, and you present those as a piece to those people because they'll enjoy it and they'll appreciate it and probably listen to it as a whole. Yeah. But then for everybody else, it's just like you just hope one of your singles ends up on
catches fire,
Chris Stapleton radio or something, and then it's boom. Which one of our songs probably ended up on Chris Stapleton? And that's a big deal. Absolutely. So anyway,
well, you guys are studs for giving me the time, and I did learn a lot, and you're making a difference. So that means everything to me too, because that's kind of the whole point of this thing. And I think it's fascinating to watch guys that came up in such a typical way and yet went through a typical process to get where you are now. Just give some of those folks hope that just think one way is the only way. So I think you do a lot of very unique things and you're helping people out. So I appreciate you very much.
Thanks, Tegan. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Keep on keeping on the golden age caffeine. It's some sidewind you're on. Another situation. See the road from the stripes with the lights coming on. Freedom came upon a catastrophic dream. Another dark page to turn. Another situation. They can't have your heart to find. To pursue once has just another time. And every wish ain't hope till the soul is mine. Keep your muse on loop till your angel cries. A sunlit paths you're on, obscure majestic trees. Can't see which way to turn. Just take a new direction. See the road from the side. Your old strides wherever long. Free to think about the way it's supposed to be. It's another dark page to turn. It's another situation. What's never seen will go untold. Don't talk about it. What one can glean will never know. Won't know about it. What's never seen will go untold. We'll stand up and shout it. You can't come clean unless you know what side of the road you're from.